Welcome to episode 15 of the Lone Hockey Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something a little different after the past few days where we've talked about some players and we've talked about some deeper dives into some of those players, some of those younger players specifically. And today, what we want to talk about is expected goals in hockey. Now, expected goals, one of my favorite analytics to evaluate by far because expected goals is very nuanced in the sense of how you can evaluate it and how you can translate it within modern hockey as well. And there's a lot of usage available within expected goals. You see expected goal numbers available publicly online, which is also really nice to have because sometimes you don't get those easily accessible numbers. So by being able to have some numbers available online, it's really important to be able to evaluate some players in particular ways with the available analytics that are available online and stuff like that. And Money Puck's a really good site. There's Natural Stat Trick. There's some other sites that do a really good job of being able to cover individual and team analytics at the same time, which is really nice and really nuanced to have in terms of the modern day game and the modern day perception of analytics as well. Now, when we talk about expected goals or XG with a capital G, there's expected goals, which is just the normal expected goals. There's XGA, which is expected goals against, and then there's expected goals for percentage, which is it's typically measuring possession, but also the likelihood of shots and pucks going in the net. And then there's on ice relative numbers. So this could be relative for a player or the team in general, numbers relative in terms of their expected goals numbers to their teammates, their opponents, to the team in general, and so on and so forth. So the importance is to evaluate individual players and to also evaluate the team's overall structure because with expected goals, you're getting a variety of numbers. That's a good thing about expected goals. It's not just you have one particular thing, you're getting the Fenwick shot. So Fenwick is measuring a lot of different shots. It's not measuring the unblocked or excuse me, it's not measuring block shots. It's not measuring just solely shot attempts. It's measuring the actual shots mainly. That's the main focus of Fenwick. So when we talk about expected goals, relying on those Fenwick numbers at the same time, it's really important to evaluate an individual player in the team in general as well. And so, what expected goals does, it assigns values to shots depending on location. So, think of an example where you have a point shot. So, a point shot coming from the point, coming from the right point, is going to have a lower value compared to a shot that's in the low slot area and that slot area in general. It's going to have a higher value in the slot because the puck has a higher likelihood of going in because it's from interior ice, it's from a more dangerous spot on the ice and inside the offensive zone. So that's what it does. There's different models and different ways of analyzing it and different coding analysis that go into expected goal models at the same time. I'm not an expert when it comes to the models. However, I understand the concept of expected goals when you're talking about the models and how they break those numbers apart and how they're able to generate those numbers in general. So when talking about expected goals, you're looking at the value of shots. You're looking at the likelihood of pucks going into the net based on the quality of the shot. And this is the other good thing about this is how it measures the actual shot. It doesn't measure missed shots. It doesn't measure shot attempts. That's a very wide domain when we're talking about shot attempts and shots in general. So with expected goals, you're looking at the value numbers and the solely relied upon value numbers when it comes to shots and the percentage and likelihood of shots and pucks going into the net. So there's a lot of different players, and obviously you see a lot of different skill players who are really good with their expected goal numbers. Typically, a 60-40 rate is pretty elite, 60 being the possession number for the player with a higher expected goal value and higher expected goal percentage value. So with 60%, you're getting an elite player, an elite possession player. 55 is typically around that same range. As long as it's over 50, that's when teams are usually able to control possession, depending on if it's expected goals for and a percentage number, or at the same time if it's actual in zone expected goals. If you're getting over 50%, typically that's a good marker of teams being able to generate offense and being able to generate more than the opposing team. And it depends on the quality of the players. It depends on the makeup of the team. It depends on the quality of the top six scorers as well. So at the same time, the better a team is, typically the better that they're going to have expected goal numbers. And so there's a lot of different qualities that go into that as well. And it's really important when talking about expected goals and its use when it comes to scouting and coaching. Because when I was scouting, I remember using expected goal numbers on Instat quite a bit And I was so fascinated by it. I always loved looking into it because it would always measure it so precisely, and it would be so precise and so accurate. And I would be able to get a better feel for certain players based on their expected goal numbers and how they're able to shoot. If they're interior players, if they're more perimeter type players. So it depends on the type of player. If you're getting a player who's more of a perimeter player, likely it's going to be a situation where you have that player ends up not necessarily generating as much in terms of expected goal value and generating more from the outside and generating sometimes less in their shots because if they're more of a perimeter player, there's less of a likelihood they're going to take shots just for the sake of just taking them, especially if they're a more quality player. However, the utmost quality players are going to look at not only generating interior when it comes to offense and being able to translate their expected goal numbers to that, but also being able to understand how to leverage those spots and leverage shot selection. So shot selection has a really big purpose when it comes to expected goal values and also the more quality players when it comes to scouting as well. And I've noticed a correlation in a sense with the better players. It doesn't matter the age group, where the better they are at finding interior ice with their instincts, with the eye test first, and then being able to actually translate that with their expected goal numbers and being able to find interior ice, getting to the middle, understanding where the location of their shots are coming from. So if those two link together, it's a good correlation to have and a good habit for that player to have over time. And as long as they're able to generate that knack and that consistency for finding offense and finding lanes, finding structure, finding expected goal numbers all the time, then that's a better likelihood that that player is going to have better success going on to the next level and moving up at the next level as well. So when you look at the expected goal values, we mentioned before how 60% is essentially a dominant value when it comes to expected goal for and XG percentage as well. So anything over 60% is an elite dominant type of rate because that means that the other 40% is going the opposite way. And at the same time, so by being able to have a 60-40 margin, it controls a lot of shots, it controls a lot of expected goals on net, and it controls a lot of shot value in terms of how the player or the team is able to produce. So when you're looking at over 60%, really important statistic and really important when analyzing the importance of expected goals as well. And so it's very adaptable too. You look at expected goals, it's very adaptable because you can utilize it obviously in a lot of different ways, which is really nice because you can use it in the offensive zone, you can use it in the defensive zone if you want to measure XGA against and the percentages and understanding what goes into that in terms of a defensive standpoint. That's also really important because sometimes teams can give up interior shots and give up shots from the slot that are dangerous shots, and teams and coaches have to find a way to work around that and make sure that they're preventing one of those things. So expected goals also has defensive value when you're talking about a scouting and a coaching perspective as well. And so, but we mentioned, and going back to the adaptability, it's very versatile when it's within the model and how it's selecting value for shots. Because obviously, if you're getting a higher quality shot from interior space, the model is going to assign a higher value to that versus a shot that's along the perimeter on the outside near the point, whatever it may be, it's going to have a lower value by far. And sometimes I've seen point shots have a value less than 3% of a likelihood of actually going to the net. And you measure that, and obviously the 3% is still 3%, and there's a 97% chance of that puck not going in the net because it's from the point, it's from a low quality area. You if you have different circumstances where say the puck is shot from the point, but then it gets deflected in the slot. Okay, now you're changing the angle. Now you're changing the whole perception of the shot because of how the angle was changed off that redirection. And typically redirections happen within the slot area because there's going to be more net front coverage from players working up to try and get around the net. So you're going to have a higher value based off that deflection. And usually that's also measured as a deflection type shot within the model in itself as well. So, and the other thing, we mentioned this briefly before, but this is the advantage that expected goals has over Corsi because I don't like Corsi, especially when it comes to advanced analytics. And a lot of players in the NHL have talked about how they don't like it. And I totally agree when it comes to it because when it comes to Corsi, it's a very wide domain. You're analyzing so many different outcomes. You're analyzing shot attempts. You're actually analyzing shot attempts from anywhere. It could be even in the neutral zone. A neutral zone shot on goal could just it could be a dump in that ends up going on goal. That's going to get counted by the offense officials as a shot. That's going to get counted within the marker of Corsi as a shot. And even if it misses the net, sometimes it'll still count because the player has that likelihood of trying to shoot that puck on net. So when you're talking about Corsi, it's not my favorite, and it's very flawed in terms of how it's used because it's such a wide domain that you're not getting narrow focus and narrow perception of what it actually is. And sometimes it can be good for measuring the actual shot attempts, and it can be a really good basic stat for teams and coaches to be able to use at minor levels and AAA levels and stuff like that. At the same time, it's not necessarily a useful, relied upon stat long term because there's so many other factors that go into that as well. But expected goals, the whole model that you're able to generate a lot of play driving qualities off of that, and you're able to understand a lot that goes into play driving elements, the shot chance and the shot generation, but very specific in terms of the value of it and very pinpointed in terms of how valuable those shots are, especially from interior space, like I've mentioned multiple times. We've mentioned how expected goals against it measures the quality of opportunities against XGF and how it measures expected goals for and typically in favor of the team. So when we're talking about expected goals from a wider standpoint, it's very important to understand the concept of expected goals for a team, for coaches, for scouts, being able to incorporate those different analyses when it comes to expected goals, especially within scouting nowadays. It's so easily accessible. You have obviously it's a little bit trickier when it comes to younger levels, but when it comes to pro scouting, you have a lot more publicly accessible data online to be able to find expected goal values and understand the values that go into that. So with expected goals, you're getting a lot of different value outputs when it comes to the models of expected goals and also the value of the shot maps in general. So a lot of different factors that go into expected goals and how valuable they are to a team structure over time as well.